welcome you all to sixth week of Learning Analytics and Tools course. So we have been doing following a routine for past 5 weeks where we do quick recap of what has happened in those weeks, and then we solve last runs or previous year's assignments. So last week has been pretty easy with a lot of numericals, and even this week would be easier because it has a lot of numericals. So I see same names attending every week, so we'll not waste our times into you know telling everyone that what are the how this session happens and what is the purpose of session, because I think we all know why we are meeting every week, right? So just like last week, this week also we are continuing with the diagnostic analytics part. Yeah. So we did descriptive analytics. We learned what are different visualizations or graphs which we can use to represent the data which we have, and we understand what our data looks like. So what question? So the next level question is why question, that why a particular so let me just one opinion, is this blue ink visible? Is it okay, or should I change it to black because it changed automatically midway?
Blue is visible.
Blue is visible. Okay, so let's continue with the blue. Okay. So why particular thing has happened? So we are mainly dealing with learning analytics where we kind of use log data or learners' actions to understand how the learning is happening and what are different learning processes which students undergo, right? So that's why it is very important that why a particular you know what made that particular student reach to that particular result. So if a student has achieved some learning objective faster or in a better way compared to other students, so we can do some comparative analysis and we can identify the points which that particular student is doing differently. So in order to do that, we need to explore this why question. So in last week we saw correlation and clustering, and we solved different problems of correlation and clustering. And this week we will be doing pattern mining and process mining. So there are two ways to do pattern mining in learning analytics. So one is sequential pattern mining and one is differential sequence mining. So we need to understand what is sequential pattern mining, because in differential sequence mining we do sequential pattern mining only, but we do it for a two groups rather than at individual level or at student level. We do SPM at group level, and then we do the comparative analysis of frequent patterns in those groups. Yeah. So let us try to understand what is SPM. So, in order to mine for the frequent pattern, we need to understand that log data is a sequence of actions, and there are certain sets of actions that we keep repeating as students. So, when you are learning through some online learning environment where you need to log in and you need to read some content, you need to watch videos, and then you need to solve some questions, and you need to answer some queries in forum. So these are the set of actions which you will be doing in that particular environment. So likewise, if there are 100 students, they all will be doing those actions, not necessarily in the same sequence. A few would be doing some chapters which they find difficult, they would be spending more time on that. So every student will have a different approach to learning and different actions to learning. So we try to capture which set of actions or which sequence of action is happening repeatedly among students or among individuals. And in order to find that, we consider that sequence of actions like reading, appearing for quiz, and again watching video. So those three actions will become, that sequence will become our pattern. Hmm? So there are two matrix to calculate in SPM. One is sequence support or S support, and other one is instance frequency or I support. or eye frequency also. So this is also called as eye frequency. Yeah. So once we have figured out what are the different patterns which are occurring within the log data, then we can calculate this S support and eye frequency. So what does S support mean? So S support, the textbook definition is it is number of individual action sequences for a group where that sequence of actions occurs at least once. Yeah, very difficult to interpret or very difficult to understand. So here the sequence, if you remember, we just now discussed that there could be a sequence of reading, appearing for the quiz, and watching video. So let us try to visualize that is the sequence of action. Now, how many such action sequences have occurred for a within the group? So in simple English, we can say that how many students have that particular sequence of actions or have that particular pattern. Yeah. So even though definition is very confusing, it means that how many students from that group have that particular pattern occurring. That's the S support. So it is also called as S support. And eye frequency is defined as number of times that pattern occurs within that action sequence. So now within that action sequence is nothing but our log data. Okay? So in that log data of a student, how many times that pattern is occurring? So that in plain English it means number of times that pattern is occurring for each student. So how many times that pattern has occurred for every student is given by instance frequency or eye frequency or eye support. Yeah? So S support is out of all the students, how many students have that particular pattern, and frequency support is eye support is or eye frequency is number of times that pattern is occurring per student. For every student, how many times that pattern has occurred. Okay, so keep these questions in mind and don't get confused. Another way to remember is S support, S for student, how many students have it. I frequency, what is frequency of that pattern for each student. Okay, so that's the another trick to remember. S support, so S is for students, how many students have that particular pattern, and I frequency is per student, is how we interpret frequency. So what is the frequency of that particular pattern for every student? So going to DSM, so these two metrics, S support and eye frequency, will tell us that how that pattern, how significantly that particular pattern is occurring. Significantly as in how frequently, what is the significance of that particular action or that particular action sequence within the log data. Yeah, so these numbers give us insight about that. So what happens is in DSM is, instead of considering for individual students in our sample size, what we do is we consider groups, and when we want to compare behaviors of group, what are the different patterns followed by different groups, at that time we choose DSM, that's differential sequence mining. So we consider two groups and then we mine for patterns using our SPM technique. We'll try to count how many times that particular pattern has occurred, what is the frequency of that pattern for each student, and so on and so forth. So same thing we will do, but we will do for entire group, two different groups. And we can also use statistical tests to compare the S support and eye frequency of every pattern for both the groups. So we'll have different values for statistical test, the p values for statistical test. So that will tell us whether the behavior or the number of patterns are significantly different between these two groups. Okay, so this is the importance of DSM. It will statistically tell us if the groups are behaving in different way, if the patterns are occurring in different ways, statistically significant ways. So when we want to actually establish the difference, this will help. The p value will help us to claim that these two groups are behaving differently because these patterns are occurring significantly more number of times in this particular group compared to the other group, and so on. And again, we can calculate S support and I frequency for both the groups and compare them to understand which pattern is more frequent in which group. Okay. So even though it is sounding a little confusing, but it is nothing but looking for frequent sequence of actions. Because log data has action and time. Okay. So log data has two component: action which student has performed and the timestamp or time at which that action got performed. Yeah? So this tells us about sequential nature, right? Sequences, which action occurred first and which action occurred immediately after that. So there is a sequence of actions. So both of these variables together, they give us information about sequence. They give us information about duration of each action, because every action has a timestamp associated. So with the help of that timestamp, we can calculate the duration of that particular action. So the temporal nature, that is it gives us sequence, duration, and also frequency of that action. Yeah. So if we exclude duration, then sequence and frequency, these two metrics, we can find out using pattern mining. If that sequence of action, how many times it is happening, right? So pattern mining helps us with sequence and frequency together. Okay. Now going to process mining. So last week we also saw the state transition diagram, where nodes and edges and how they were transitioning from one action to other action. So process mining is type of extension of that. So when we consider log data of any learning environment, there are so many actions. Sometimes there are more than 25 or more than 30 distinct actions which are getting captured at the server end. So when you have 30 different actions, then your state transition diagram will be very difficult to interpret. So in order to make it easier to interpret, there are many algorithms and many tools, the softwares, which will help us in coming up with that state transition diagram. They consider, again, these algorithms, they will consider the action, the time at which that particular action has happened, and then what is the unique identifier of each student or each user. Yeah. So these are main things which are getting captured in log. So using that data, we consider every action as a node, and edge is nothing but transition between those two actions, just like we saw last week, the same thing. And then there are different matrices which help us in abstraction or retaining only the important information in that huge diagram. Yeah. So these matrices are significance and correlation. Okay. So process modeling, it will analyze the log data and then have some nodes which will correspond to events or actions happening in the log data, and the edge denotes the transition between these actions or nodes. Now, in order to abstract that, or in order to retain only the relevant and important information, we follow two matrices: significance and correlation. So significance is which node or which action is occurring more frequently in that log data. Okay. So it is measured for both nodes and edges. So when we say node, we are talking about the action, and when we say edges, we are talking about transition between those actions. Yeah. So it is not, significance is nothing but relative importance of occurrence. That means relative frequency. You all would be knowing the concept of relative frequency, where the most frequent action is considered as 1. will count the frequency of every action, and we will divide that frequency with the what is the number or what is the count of most frequent action. So if there are three different actions of read, write, and quiz. hmm? So read has happened some 12 times, write has happened 3 times, and quiz has happened 4 times. So which is the most frequent action here? Read. So how we will calculate the significance? For read it will be 12 divided by 12, for write it will be 3 divided by 12, and for quiz it will be 4 divided by 12. So this becomes 1, this becomes 1 by 4.25, and this becomes 1 by 3.33. Yeah, so this is how we calculate relative frequency. Okay, the most frequent action is 1, and correlation is how these two events are closely related. So correlation is very similar to if you remember the transition probability we calculated. So it is very similar to that, how strongly these two events are occurring together. So how read, write, from read how many times the student is going to write, how many times it is going to quiz. So that will tell us how read is strongly correlated with write action and with the quiz action. So as the word suggests, correlation is how these events are closely related, how frequent is the transition of one node 1 with node 2. Okay, so we are done with revising this. So as we will go and solve some numericals, or we go through some questions, we will also clear concepts as we go, and if there are any doubt we can take it up at the end. Okay, so let's start with this last week's assignment with question 1. Which of the following is not an algorithm for developing process model? So we talked about process model, and I also mentioned that there are different algorithms and different matrices which help us in abstraction or interpretation of this state transition diagram or process models, where we are considering nodes as action and edges are transition. So different algorithms they have different ways to retain the nodes and actions. They have their ways of abstracting nodes and actions. So many of the algorithms they group the patterns. If a particular action is occurring only once, but that particular action when considered as a group with some other action, then the count increases. So in that sense, their different algorithms have different ways of retaining nodes and edges, right? So that's why. So matrices I revised. These are the matrices: significance and correlations for process mining. So these are covered in the lecture also, and we just spoke about these two matrices. So I was talking about the significance and correlation. So based on that, there are different algorithms which are used. So the question is, which of the following is not an algorithm? Okay, so alpha miner is the mining algorithm which will retain all the nodes, no matter if it is if that particular node or that particular action is occurring only once in the entire group of log data. Because process model is nothing but state transition diagram for entire group. So we drew state transition diagram for one single student's log data in last week, but when we want to consider state transition diagram for entire group, what we do is we follow the process modeling. So for that, when we are combining log data for entire group, if group has 30 students, if group has 50 students, then we are considering log data of all the 50 students. So out of that 50 students, even if action has occurred only once or occurred only twice, then all these algorithms will have different ways to retain and to represent that state transition diagram. Okay, so So based on that, there are different types of mining algorithm. So three algorithms which are mentioned here are alpha miner, heuristic miner, and fuzzy miner. So as the name suggests, miner. So all these are algorithms to come up with the process model, and ProM is the tool which is used to create process model. Tools or software used to create process model. Yeah. So ProM is not the algorithm, but alpha miner, heuristic miner, and fuzzy miner are the algorithms which are used to create process models. So we will not go into how every algorithm works because that will lead to more confusion. But the trick is to identify this word miner. So all the mining algorithm will have the word miner at the end, or some words like diagram at the end. Now question 2, what can be used for differentiating interaction behavior between two groups? Okay, so we have discussed this in detail. So I'll give you some time. I'll wait for the options in the chat, and I'll have some water meanwhile. So even if you have missed the first part of the today's interaction, by reading out names you can make out what could be the missing or fill in the blanks answer. Yeah, as the name suggests, differential sequence mining. So we will do sequence mining. We will mine for patterns or action of sequences, sequence of actions, and we'll do some differential analysis between the groups. Okay, so that's differential sequence mining. I got all the correct answer in the chat box. So let's move on to next question. What is meant by sequence support? Now sequence support is also known as S support. So I had given you one shortcut to remember. S stands for student, right? So S support tells us about number of students, how many students will have that particular pattern. Okay, very easy to remember. That is option number 2, right? That's how that is based on definition of sequence support. How many students have that particular pattern? Now instance support is also known as I frequency. So I frequency has the word frequency. That means I frequency will tell us about how frequently that particular pattern is occurring. Yeah. So how frequently that particular pattern is occurring for each student, right? That is what we mean by frequency. When we say frequency, that means for every student, for every individual in that group, for how many times that particular pattern is occurring. So that is told us by option number 1. Yeah. So question number 5, dash dash support captures the number of individual action sequences for a group where that sequence action occurs at least once. So let us try to break down what we are reading. Dash dash support captures number of individual action sequences for a group where sequence of action has occurred at least once. So individual is student in our case. So we are capturing number of students where that sequence of action has occurred. So what tells us about number of students? Which metric tells us about number of students? sequence support or S support, right? So that brings us to the correct answer, option 1, sequence. Yeah. Now moving to next question. So this data is for next 5 question, from question number 6 to question number 10. And we have 3 students with following sequence of actions in a learning environment. And based on that, we need to calculate eye frequency in the sequence quiz to read. Okay, correct to 2 decimals. Eye frequency of action quiz to read. Okay, so I'll change this here and we will write quiz to read, and we will count this transition for every student. For S1, quiz to read, so when it is happening, so I'm not reading out this action sequence aloud, but we will try to identify where this Q to R transition, quiz to read transition is happening. Okay, so quiz to read, quiz forum, no, so it has occurred once for S1. Then quiz to read has occurred here once for S2. Then quiz to read at S3 has occurred once, twice, yeah, that's it, twice. So this is the how many times for each student it has occurred. So what is the total number of times? Four number of times it has occurred. Now we have to calculate eye frequency. What eye frequency is? For each student, how many times that particular pattern has occurred, right? So what is the total number of students in our sample? 3, S1, S2 and S3. So 3, we have 3 students. What is the total number of times this sequence has occurred? 4. So that means eye frequency would be number of times that has occurred in total divided by number of students, which is 1.33. Option 2. Okay, so let me write here S1, S2, S3, and this gives us total of 4. So frequency of this action sequence in entire log data of all 3 students was 4, and we had to calculate frequency of this sequence for our sample. Our sample had 3 students. Every student it has occurred once, so that's why we are considering 3 students, and then it is 4 is this frequency. Now how many times this sequence has occurred in our entire sample log data for S1, S2, S3 together, how many times this sequence has occurred? So this sequence has occurred 4 times, and it for 3 students, so that's why 4 divided by 3 will tells us frequency of transition quiz to read for each student. No, it is not S support. S support is how many students have it. Out of total students, how many students have it? Yeah, so next question is S support for this same action sequence, quiz to read. This is again quiz to read. Yeah, so quiz to read S1, S2 and S3. So for S1 it occurred once, for S2 it occurred once, and for S3 it occurred twice. Yeah, so for how many students this has occurred? 3 students, right? Out of 3 students. So S support how many students it has occurred out of how many students, which is 1. Option number 1. Yeah. So that's the difference between S support and frequency. So for S support, we will always consider number of students having that particular action, and here number of times that particular action sequence occurred. So I frequency will tell, we will consider how many times that particular sequence has occurred, and in S support we will consider for how many students that has occurred. Out of total students, how many students that has occurred. So if S2 wouldn't have had that particular sequence, then we would have considered 2 only. 2 out of 3 would be our S support. Yes, Riya?
So, ma'am, I support and I frequency both are different.
No, I support and I frequency are same. S support is different. S support and I frequency are different.
But, ma'am, I support tells the number of times for each action performed for individual student. And
Yeah.
I frequency tells that how many times total this action performed.
No. S support tells us for how many students that action has occurred, and frequency will tell us how many times for every student that action has occurred. Yeah. So what is frequency? Frequency is how many times that has occurred for every user or every student. So that's I frequency. Yeah. So moving on to next question. What is the significance of action read for student 2? Okay. So significance is importance of that particular action. So how we will calculate importance of any action? So what we will do, we are supposed to calculate significance of read for S2. So we will count how many times read has occurred. So read has occurred 3 times. Now similarly we will do it for forum. We will do it for all the actions which are there. Forum 1, 2, 2. So forum is 2. Then video 1, 2. Video is 2. And now quiz once. Quiz has occurred once. So for significance, it is relative frequency. Significance is relative frequency. For relative frequency, what we will consider is, we will consider the action which has occurred most number of times. So here, when we counted frequency of every action, we found out that read has occurred most number of times, that is thrice. Yeah. So let us write down this here for this question. Okay. Read, forum, then it was what was it, video, and quiz. Yeah. So read has occurred. So let me finish, and then I will take up this doubts for related to this part. Okay. So read has occurred 3 times, forum and video has occurred twice, and quiz has occurred only once. So let us mention here 3 times, twice, and once. Okay. So significance calculation, we will consider this and this number 3 because it is the most frequent action. So 3 divided by 3. For forum it will be 2 divided by 3. For video it will be 2 divided by 3. And for quiz it will be 1 divided by 3, which will be 1. 2 divided by 3, 0.66, 0.66 and 0.33. So this is significance. So wow, nice, got deleted. ठीक है. Read happened twice, forum twice, then video twice, and lastly quiz once. This much I remember. Okay, let me just cross check once. Yes. Yeah. So here what we will do is significance. For read it will be 3 divided by 3. We will consider this because it is most frequent action. Then forum 2 divided by 3, video 2 divided by 3, and quiz 1 divided by 3, which will tell us 1.66, 0.66, 0.33. So okay, previous slide, you want this slide, question 7, Shrija?
Yes, ma'am.
So here we counted for how many students this particular pattern has occurred. And we divided that with total number of students we have, and we got this as support. Can we move on to question 9? Okay. Now what is the state transition probability for sequence video to quiz for student 2? So now let us copy this forum video read quiz. Forum video read quiz. Forum video read quiz. Okay. Forum video read quiz. So read forum read video. Next sequence is read forum read video. Read forum read video. Okay. So if you remember how we calculated transition probability in last class, you remember we calculated number of times transition from video to any other node has happened. So let us count number of times video to any other node. So here video to any other node once. That's it. Video to any other node has occurred only once. Now we will find the count of video to quiz. Video to quiz. So how many times video to quiz has happened? It has not happened even once. So this is 0. So that gives us 0 divided by 1, which is 0. Answer is 0. So very easy to calculate, easy to understand. So question 10, what is the significance of action quiz for student 1? Okay, for student 1, let us calculate the video forum quiz and read. That's it. So how many times video has occurred? 1, 2, 3. How many times forum has occurred? 1, 2. How many times quiz has occurred? 1, 2. How many times read has occurred? 1, 2, and 3. So number 3 is the highest frequency. So what we will do when we want to calculate significance, we will divide this count by 3. Okay, so for video it will be 3 by 3. For forum it will be 2 by 3. For quiz it will be 2 by 3. And for read it will be 3 by 3. 3 by 3 1, 2 by 3.66, 2 by 3.66, and 1. And we were supposed to find out frequency for quiz, which is 0.66. So let us check if 0.66 is part of options. Yes. Yeah. So I'll write down here as well. There was video, forum, quiz, and read. Yeah. So number of times video happened. So video thrice, forum twice, quiz twice, and read thrice. Read thrice, and twice. Yeah. So how we will calculate the significance? 3 by 3, because this was the highest frequency. Forum 2 by 3, quiz 2 by 3, and read 3 by 3. So quiz is this, correct answer 0.66. So questions will be very similar to this in your final exam also, and in your assignments also, where you will be asked to calculate significance and I frequency, S support. So you know now how to do that. Okay, you want fuzzy minor and H cutoff. So fuzzy minor is one of the most popular algorithms to create process mining. So process mining is the process model, which is the end output of process mining is just like a state transition diagram. So what fuzzy miner does is it converts every action into a node, and the transition between these actions is depicted by the edge. So I'm going to erase this, because we already discussed significance in the problems twice, so we don't need that here. Okay, so there are let us consider same set of 4 actions, like video, forum, read, and quiz. Okay, so video, from video, forum, then going to quiz, and then going to read. But somebody would be again going from read to forum, from forum to video, from quiz to video, from video to read, and so on. So there are multiple edges and multiple nodes. So the as the transition between these actions occur, these edges will get more confusing, going from forum to read also, from read to forum also, then from read to quiz to forum, and so on, so since there are just 4 actions, we can still spend some time and interpret, but just imagine how many possible transitions could be there for 25 actions, 30 actions, or 50 actions. That would be, so the state transition diagram would lead to something which cannot be comprehended easily. So in order to have some level of abstraction, so abstraction is, we will consider only relevant information, and we will not consider information which is not making any difference, or which we find irrelevant. So how we will consider, or how we will decide which information is relevant and which information is irrelevant, is using this significance and correlation, using these two values. So significance tells us about how frequently that particular action has been occurring, and correlation is generally for group of nodes, how closely they are transitioning, the transition between two nodes, how frequent that is, how, so that is given by correlation. So there is something called as utility ratio. So utility ratio is how much importance you are giving to significance and correlation. So generally what means is, how we will decide any node cutoff is depending on its significance. So we want the nodes which have high significance, only those nodes to be part of our diagram of process model. So that will lead to some sort of abstraction, that only actions which are occurring very frequently, only those actions will be part of our final process model, right? So when we decide cutoff based on significance, that is significance cutoff. And now how we will consider node cutoff is based on significance of that particular node, or that particular edge cutoff is significance of that particular edge, how frequently that transition has been occurring. So if that transition is frequent, then that means that significance is high and correlation is high for that group of nodes, those two nodes. Yeah? So when such correlation is high, significance is high, so we will retain those nodes and those edges, and we will let go of the low significance and low correlation in edges and nodes. And utility ratio is how much importance you want to give to a node and a edge. So that's the utility ratio. So utility ratio will decide if you want to retain all the nodes, if you want to retain only the important transitions. So that's the utility ratio formula, which will give importance to node and significance, node and edge. Node and edge. So cutoff is based on these significance and correlation value. The edge with low cutoff and low significance, we will not be part of our end process model, the end product of process model. And based on these numbers, we decide whether to include it or to exclude it, or to not consider it. And significance and correlation are the calculations which will help us in deciding the cutoff values. Ria, can you tell me what is, I did not get the context of your question. STD 6.9, I don't know in what context you are asking this.
Actually, ma'am, in the slide, sir has told one question what does STD deviation means, standard deviation 6.9 means. And the answer was data is skewed. Possible most of the students have read to quiz pattern, this type of answer, so I have not answered.
Okay, because STD is generally standard deviation, which gives us information about how that data is distributed from the mean. Yeah, so if mean is 10 and standard deviation is 6.9, that means data values can range from 10 to plus minus 2 standard deviation is generally statistics rule. So if mean is 10 and standard deviation is 6.9, then 10 plus 2 into 6.9 and 10 minus 2 into 6.9 is the range of our sample. The distribution of our sample, 90% of our sample lies between that mean plus minus 2 standard deviation. So maybe your doubt will be on the answers which you're not able to understand, maybe because of this.
Yes, ma'am.
So these calculations are all simple. I have even given you trick how to identify, how to remember S support and I frequency. So S support, S is for students, so how many students are having it, and I frequency is nothing but frequency of that particular pattern for each student. So these definitions we will use to calculate the S support and I frequency when we are doing this kind of problems. Yeah. So generally S support and I frequency we will calculate for entire log data. Yeah. So high correlation value, you remember correlation we discussed in last week, that how dependent and independent variable, how having one increasing one variable, what is the effect on other variable. So likewise, when we talk about correlation between nodes and edges, so highly correlated edge is, or highly correlated nodes are those which occur in that particular sequence. Say for example, if our read to forum action is occurring for every student at least 5 times in the log data which we just saw, so in that case, and okay, let me make it more easy. So you remember we had counted transition of node to any node, how many times that has occurring. So that is some frequency or some count or some number we are getting. So now we want to calculate how highly correlated the node read and forum are. So we counted which are the other nodes, all other nodes, how many times they are occurring, and out of this frequency, what is the count for R to F. So if read to any other node transition is happening, say for example 10 times, and out of those 10 times, read to forum has occurred 9 times. So that means read is highly correlated with forum. Do you agree with me that read to any other node is occurring 10 times, and out of those 10 times, read is changing or transitioning to forum 9 times out of those 10. So that means the probability of next action after read, the probability for that action to be forum is what? 9 divided by 10, which is 0.9. That means read and forum have very high correlation value. Yeah, is it clear, Ria, now? So Ria's question was, so I'm repeating this for Shrija's doubt. So Shrija's asked me to repeat again. So let me start with the question first. So Ria asked, what is the indication of high correlation value? What is meaning of high correlation value? So this is what I'm trying to explain here. So we are counting correlation, or we are determining correlation of read and forum here. Yeah. So from read, how many times we have transitioned to forum. So for that, what we will do is read to any other node. So what is the number of times, or what is the frequency of node read to any other node, not just not just forum, but any other node. Yeah. So in the example, for our understanding, let's assume that that frequency of read to any other node is 10, and the frequency of read to forum is 9. So probability that the next action after read will be forum. What is the probability that forum will occur after read action? It is occurring 9 out of 10 times, right? So 9 divided by 10, which is 0.9. So 0.9 is very high probability value, right? So highest probability could be 1, and this is 0.9. So that means read and forum are highly correlated. They are very highly, they occur, the probability that forum would be occurring after read, that read and forum, this transition occurring in our action sequence or log is very very high. That probability is very very high. That is the indication of high correlation value. Yeah, thank you, Shrija. Yeah. I'm drawing a line here because this is correlation discussion. There are no more doubts. If there are no more doubts, then I think we can end this session today here. So there are no heavy calculations in this course. Whatever you can do easily, you can do it without calculator. And this week's numericals are also very easy to and very quick to get to the answer. They are not time consuming. Last week we did some time consuming calculations. So Shrija, this correlation, significance, these are all matrices. So what I mean by matrices is the parameters which we use to make decisions. When I use word metrics or matrices, that those are the parameters which we use to make certain decisions about which node to keep, which significance to keep, or the parameter which will tell us which pattern is occurring frequently for which student and which group, and so on. So don't get hung up onto that word matrices. Matrices is the word which I use to make certain definitions clear. That S support, I frequency, significance, correlation, node cutoff. So all these things for together I am using this umbrella term of matrix. Okay, so at the end of session, so Ria, I'm just it's a kind of clarification question for you. So you want me to revise all the topics at the end of 12 weeks is what you mean by this? Have one revision session kind of thing? Okay, we can have one revision session after 12 weeks. On 13th week we can do some small revision. Yeah, but in order to do this revision in 2 hours, we will not be able to take up any doubts, but we will be kind of repeating all the concepts again. That we can do. Yeah. So I will, I'll talk to NPTEL folks, YM folks, and ask them to schedule 13th interaction also for 13th week. revision interaction. Yeah. Yeah, so thank you all for attending today's session, and we will meet next week. Things are easier for this course, not that difficult. The calculations are also not that difficult. And if certain problems are time consuming, then there are many problems which are not at all time consuming, which you will be able to do very quickly. Yeah. So don't worry about the time management also in your final exam. And we have successfully done half of the course at the end of 6 weeks. So this is 12-week course, so we are there halfway, midway. Yeah. So till now you found this course doable, so I'm sure in future also you will find this course doable and easy to understand, easy to grasp, because the question will not be going to the technicalities of the concept, but it will be more of applications of the concepts learned. So we will meet next week, and all the best. I have shared a link to previous weeks' PDFs. That folder is also pinned in the chat box, and link to previous sessions recording. That YouTube channel link is also pasted in the chat box. So I'll wait for a few seconds. So if anybody wants to copy those links, I'll give you that time to copy those links, and then I will end this session here. And those who don't have doubt or don't want to or who have already copied the links, you can leave the meeting, don't worry. So somebody joined just now and we are ending this meeting. I'm so sorry, but we are done with all the discussion and everything. I will be uploading today's this PDF also in the same PDF folder. So you will be immediately finding today's PDF in that folder only. And YouTube, this recording session recording will be uploaded on YouTube by tonight. So tomorrow anytime you should be able to see today's session recording also. Yeah. So I hope everybody has copied these links, because I am going to end this session now. Okay, thank you.